You ever heard of a book that's been called a grimoire, like a textbook of magic for the modern world? A book so potent, it's actually banned in some prisons? Well, today we're going to break down one of the most talked about and most controversial guides ever written, Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. At its core, that's exactly what this book is. But let's be clear, it's not about being nice. It's not about being fair. It's about understanding the raw mechanics of power as they've been used throughout all of human history, for good and, for worse. It's like looking under the hood of human interaction, with all the morality stripped away.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how the book itself is actually designed. Then, we're diving into some of the biggest laws, and we'll group them by themes: the art of perception, how to handle friends and enemies, and of course, the power of deception. And we'll wrap it all up by asking the big question, what are we supposed to do with all this?
Okay, so let's jump right in. Before we even get to the laws, you have to understand what this book is. It's not just a list of rules. The way it's structured is a huge part of its impact.
Now, the author, Robert Greene, he didn't just invent these laws out of thin air. You can think of him more like a historian or a detective. He studied the lives of some of the most powerful people who ever lived. We're talking everyone from schemers in royal courts to ancient military geniuses like Sun Tzu.
And he didn't just look at the last few hundred years. No, he went back 3,000 years into human history, combing through all the successes, the epic failures, the triumphs, and the catastrophes to find these timeless patterns in how power works.
And this is where the book's format gets really clever. For every single law, Greene gives you two stories. First, there's the observance, an example of someone from history who followed the law and got what they wanted. But then you get the transgression, a cautionary tale about someone who ignored it and usually paid a heavy price. It's a pretty powerful way to see these big ideas play out in real life.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. A huge theme in this book is that what's actually true doesn't matter nearly as much as what people think is true. Power, according to Greene, is really just a game of appearances.
And we're going to start with law number 1, which is absolutely crucial. It's all about managing the egos of the people who are above you in the food chain.
So, here's the uncomfortable truth behind this law. Your talent can feel like a threat to your boss. If you make them feel insecure, you become a problem. The classic story here is about Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister for King Louis XIV of France. He threw this party that was so spectacular, so over the top, that the king, who was a guest, felt totally shown up. Well, a few weeks later, Louis had Fouquet arrested and thrown in prison for the rest of his life. He learned the lesson the hard way. Never, ever outshine the master.
Now, on the complete flip side of being subtle is the need to be seen. This law basically says that in the world of power, being ignored is like death. It doesn't matter if the attention is good or bad as long as people are paying attention to you.
And you couldn't ask for a more perfect or more absurd example than this. The great showman P.T. Barnum got it. He knew that just being famous or infamous is a form of power. He'd stage these crazy spectacles, like a fake wedding between an elephant and a pony. Why? Because he knew the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about at all.
Okay, so you're managing how people see you. But power is also about the people you deal with. So now, let's dig into how the laws handle the tricky and often dangerous world of allies and enemies.
All right, get ready for one of the book's most famous and most shocking laws. Greene says you should be more careful with your friends than with your enemies. Why? Because friends are easily infected by envy. But a former enemy? If you bring them over to your side, they'll often be way more loyal because they have so much more to prove.
And as for the people who stay your enemies, well, the book is completely ruthless. It says there's no room for half measures.
The logic here is just chillingly practical. A wounded enemy isn't defeated. They're recovering. They're stewing in resentment. And they're just waiting for the right moment to get their revenge. So for real, lasting peace of mind, Greene argues you have to make sure they can never, ever come back. It's a brutal look at what it sometimes takes to survive.
And that survival instinct leads us straight into the book's most controversial ideas. This next part is all about using secrecy, misdirection, and even deception to get ahead.
You could think of these two laws as a kind of 1-2 punch. Law 3 is all about defense. Always hide what you're really up to. Otto von Bismarck, the guy who unified Germany, spent years acting like a simple country gentleman, all while he was secretly planning his rise to power. Then you've got Law 14, which is pure offense.
Act like a friend so you can gather intelligence. The art dealer Joseph Duveen would throw these amazing parties, not to have fun, but to listen as his wealthy clients let their guards down and reveal their weaknesses, info he then used to sell them art.
But here's where the book shows it's more complex than you might think. It's not just about hiding and spying. Because after all that quiet planning, once you finally decide to make your move, you have to do it with absolute boldness. The book argues that hesitation is fatal. Your doubts create problems. People admire the bold, nobody respects the timid.
So after going through all of these intense, and let's be honest, pretty dark strategies, we're left with the biggest question of all. Is this thing a playbook for sociopaths, or is there something else going on here?
At the end of the day, Green's main point is this. The game of power is being played all around you every single day, whether you like it or not. You can choose to ignore these laws, but they don't just go away. It just means you'll end up as a pawn in someone else's game, someone who does understand them.
So what's the verdict? Is this a cynical manual for manipulators, or is it an essential survival guide for a complicated world? Maybe it's not for being aggressive, but for defending yourself. As you go about your week, just try to watch for these laws in action around you. You might be shocked at how often you see them. The real question isn't just what the book is, it's what you're going to do with this knowledge.